Imagine being in a relationship where you're constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when your partner's emotions will turn toxic. You think they love you, but are they actually manipulating you into doing their bidding? The line between love and control is thin, and it's hard to see until it's too late. You might think you know the signs of a toxic relationship: the shouting matches, the constant criticism, or even the physical abuse. But what about when the control is more subtle? What about when your partner uses guilt, anger, self-pity to get what they want from you? That's emotional blackmail, and it can be just as destructive as any other form of manipulation. Sarah, a woman I spoke with recently, shared her own experience of being trapped in an emotionally abusive relationship. She told me about how her partner would make her feel guilty for not doing exactly as he said, for not meeting his expectations, or for not being available 24/7. He'd become angry and withdrawn if she didn't comply, making her feel like it was all her fault. Many people don't realize they're in this situation until it's too late, until the relationship has become a prison of fear and obligation. And that's exactly what I want to explore next. Sarah's story, feeling trapped and guilty. Sarah was a high school sweetheart who married her partner after college. She thought she had the perfect marriage: 2 kids, a beautiful home, and a loving husband. But behind closed doors, Sarah felt suffocated by her partner's constant criticism and guilt-tripping. He would tell her that she wasn't doing enough for their family, that she was a bad mother, and that he didn't know how he'd manage without her support. Sarah started to feel like she was walking on eggshells around him, never knowing when the next explosion of anger or criticism would happen. She felt trapped in a marriage where she couldn't even express herself without being shut down or made to feel guilty. Sarah's partner would often say things like, "If you really loved me, you'd do this, or you're not prioritizing our family's needs." It was as if he had created a web of emotional manipulation that left Sarah feeling drained and powerless. She felt like she couldn't escape the guilt no matter what she did. She started to doubt her own worth and began questioning whether she was truly loved by her partner, or just used for his own needs. As the months went by, Sarah found herself walking on eggshells around her partner. She'd try to bring up a topic that seemed trivial to her, but he'd make her feel guilty for even mentioning it. "Do you really need to talk about this now?" he'd say with a hint of annoyance. "Or can't you just drop it and focus on me instead? I'm trying here." The gaslighting effect was in full swing. Sarah began to doubt her own perceptions, wondering if she was overreacting or being too sensitive. She started to question her own sanity, feeling like she was the one who needed fixing, not her partner. "You're always so dramatic," he'd say, making her feel like she was the problem. One day, Sarah found herself apologizing for something that wasn't even her fault. Her partner had made a mistake, but instead of taking responsibility, he made her feel guilty for pointing it out. She felt like she was trapped in a never-ending cycle of self-doubt and guilt. And as she looked into his eyes, she wondered if this is what love really looked like, or just a clever form of emotional manipulation. As Sarah sat in stunned silence, she couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something fundamentally wrong with her. She replayed every argument, every conversation, trying to pinpoint where things had gone so terribly wrong. "Is this my fault?" she wondered. "Did I drive him to behave like this?" The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that she was somehow responsible for his behavior. She remembered the countless times he'd guilt-tripped her into doing his chores, or canceling plans because of a work meeting. She recalled the way he'd pouted and sulked when she didn't meet his expectations. "He's just upset because I'm not meeting his needs," she told herself. But deep down, she knew that wasn't entirely true. He was using her guilt as a tool to control her. As the days went by, Sarah found herself increasingly anxious and uncertain. She started questioning her own sanity. Was it possible that she'd just been too sensitive all along? Was this really what love looked like? The more she doubted herself, the more vulnerable she became. And he knew it. You see, emotional blackmail is often subtle, but the signs are there if you know what to look for. Some signs are more obvious than others, Like when someone constantly makes you feel guilty for wanting space or time for yourself. Don't leave me alone tonight. I'll be so hurt. Or, if you really loved me, you'd do this one thing for me. These phrases might seem harmless at first, but they're actually controlling language that can erode your self-worth. You know how it feels when someone makes you question your own sanity? When they make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, the problem is you. That's exactly what emotional blackmail does. It plants seeds of doubt in your mind. And once those seeds take root, it's like a slow-moving poison that eats away at your self-worth. You see, emotional blackmail isn't just one isolated incident. It's a cycle that escalates over time. It starts with tiny seeds, seemingly insignificant requests or demands, like "I need you to cancel your plans so I can spend the weekend with my friends." At first, you might think, what's the big deal? But then comes the guilt trip. You're being selfish. You never care about me. And before you know it, those seeds take root, and you start making sacrifices for the other person, even if it means sacrificing your own needs. As Sarah started to recognize the patterns of emotional blackmail in her relationship, she began to feel a sense of unease. She'd always been the one to give in, to make concessions, to put everyone else's needs before her own. But something inside her shifted. She realized that by constantly sacrificing for her partner, she was losing herself in the process. She started small, taking back little things like time with friends or solo activities. Her partner would get upset, but Sarah stood firm. "No," she'd say, "I deserve this too." It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of guilt and anxiety. But with each passing day, she felt a sense of empowerment growing inside her. For the first time in years, Sarah started to think about what she wanted, not just what everyone else wanted from her. She began to prioritize her own needs, and it was liberating. But as she looked around at the relationship dynamics that had been holding her back for so long, she couldn't help but wonder, was this enough? Was she truly breaking free, or were there still chains binding her? As she stood at the crossroads, Sarah felt the weight of her decision bearing down on her. She had been in a relationship that was suffocating her for far too long. The emotional blackmail had become a constant presence, a nagging voice that whispered, "You'll never be enough, and you'll always be alone." But Sarah knew she couldn't stay. She had tried to please her partner, to meet their needs, but it seemed the more she gave, the more they took. She thought back to the countless nights spent arguing over nothing, the endless apologies, the promises of change that never came, the tears shed, the sleepless nights, the constant self-doubt. It was all taking a toll on her mental health. And yet, as hard as it was, Sarah knew she had to leave. This is often the hardest part of the journey, leaving behind the familiar even if it's toxic. It's like cutting off a limb that's been attached for so long. But in that moment, Sarah knew she had no choice. She was tired of being held hostage by her partner's insecurities, tired of living in fear of their anger, and tired of sacrificing her own happiness. As Sarah began to break free from the toxic cycle of emotional blackmail, she started to see herself in a new light. She remembered who she was before she met him, confident, outspoken, and full of life. But over time, his constant criticism and guilt-tripping had chipped away at her self-worth, leaving her feeling small and insignificant. It took courage for Sarah to confront the pain and shame he had instilled in her. She started by taking small steps towards self-care, painting again, hiking with friends, and reconnecting with loved ones. With each passing day, she felt a sense of weight lifting off her shoulders. She began to see that she didn't have to be defined by his anger or his approval. Sarah's journey was not about getting back at him, but about rediscovering herself. She started journaling, writing down her thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. It was a powerful way for her to release the emotional baggage and find her voice again. As she began to heal, Sarah realized that having a support system was crucial to her recovery. She started attending therapy sessions with a group of women who had gone through similar experiences, and they formed an unbreakable bond. They shared their stories, offered words of encouragement, and held each other accountable for their progress. Sarah's friends and family were also instrumental in her journey. Her best friend, Rachel, would often text her daily affirmations to remind her of her worth. Her mother even moved in with her for a while to provide emotional support during the darkest days. Having people who understood what she was going through made all the difference. But having accountability wasn't just about having people around you. It was also about being accountable to yourself. Sarah started journaling and tracking her progress, making sure to reflect on her actions and reactions to her partner's behavior. She learned to recognize the signs of emotional blackmail and took steps to break free from them. It wasn't easy, but with time and effort, she began to reclaim her life and find her voice again. It's a common misconception that emotional blackmail ends when the relationship does. But what happens when you think you've escaped the toxic dynamic only to realize your partner is still manipulating you? Sarah thought she'd finally broken free from her ex's grip. But it wasn't until months after their breakup that she realized the full extent of his control. As she reflected on her past relationship, Sarah began to see the manipulation for what it was: a toxic cycle of emotional blackmail. It wasn't just about him controlling her actions. He'd also guilt-tripped her into staying. "If you leave me, I'll lose everything," he'd say. Or, "You're so selfish, only thinking about yourself." The words still echoed in her mind, making it hard to breathe. Sarah knew she had to forgive herself before she could move on. She started small, journaling her thoughts and feelings, practicing yoga to calm her racing heart. It wasn't easy. There were times when the memories came flooding back, and she felt like crawling into a hole. But she kept going. She prioritized self-care, scheduling time for activities that brought her joy: painting, hiking, reading. Slowly, but surely, Sarah began to rebuild herself. Healing is a process, not a destination. It's a journey of small steps forward, each one paving the way for the next. As she looked back on her past, Sarah realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about releasing the weight of it. As Sarah reflected on her journey to freedom, she realized that the hardest part wasn't confronting John's infidelity, or even his emotional blackmail. It was letting go of the weight of guilt and shame that came with being in a toxic relationship for so long. She remembered the countless times she'd sacrificed her own needs and desires to keep peace, only to have John turn around and use those same sacrifices against her. The memories still stung, but Sarah knew she had to confront them head-on if she wanted to truly heal. With each passing day, Sarah felt herself becoming lighter, freer from the emotional chains that bound her for so long. She started taking small steps towards self-care: yoga classes, long walks in the park, and even a new hobby or two. It was a slow process, but Sarah knew she was on the right path. This is where the real healing begins, I want to tell you. Not when we confront our abusers or exes, but when we finally start taking care of ourselves. When we learn to love and forgive ourselves for staying in those toxic relationships for so long. As we reflect on Sarah's story, there are some crucial takeaways that I want to share with you. Firstly, emotional blackmail is a subtle and insidious form of manipulation that can leave us feeling trapped and powerless. It's not just about the big gestures or grand romantic gestures, but often it's those small, subtle actions that chip away at our self-worth. We've seen how Sarah felt like she was walking on eggshells around her partner, constantly trying to avoid triggering his anger or guilt trips. This is a common experience for many of us who have been in emotionally abusive relationships. One of the most important lessons we can learn from Sarah's story is that our worth and value come from within. We don't need someone else's validation or approval to feel worthy. When we let go of that external validation, we start to heal and rebuild our sense of self-worth. These takeaways are crucial insights for anyone in a similar situation. Remember, you deserve to be loved and respected, not manipulated and controlled. You've probably heard people say that emotional blackmail is just a part of being in a relationship, that it's all about love and commitment. But let me tell you, that's not true. Emotional blackmail is a toxic behavior that can destroy even the strongest relationships. It's when one partner uses guilt, anger, or self-pity to control and manipulate the other. Think about it like this. Your partner calls you every hour, demanding to know where you are and who you're with. They show up at your workplace unannounced, just checking in. You feel trapped and anxious, never knowing when they'll show up again. This is not love. This is emotional blackmail. People often say that if you truly love someone, you'd tolerate their neediness or clinginess. But what's the cost? Your sanity? Your freedom? No. It's time to set the record straight. Emotional blackmail is never acceptable in a relationship. It's a sign of deeper issues, control, insecurity, and a lack of respect for boundaries. You see, emotional blackmail is a master manipulator. It preys on your insecurities, making you doubt yourself and question your worth. But the truth is, you have the power to break free from its grasp. Self-reflection is key to recognizing and ending emotional manipulation. As you begin to break free from the toxic cycle of emotional blackmail, it's essential to create a support network around you. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Surround yourself with people who uplift and encourage you, rather than those who feed into the manipulation. Reach out to trusted friends or family members who can offer a fresh perspective on your situation. For Emily, having her best friend Rachel by her side was instrumental in helping her recognize the emotional blackmail she was experiencing from her partner. Rachel would often remind Emily of her own worth and accomplishments, reminding her that she deserved better than being controlled and manipulated. Having someone to talk through these feelings with helped Emily gain clarity and confidence. As you build your support network, remember to also focus on self-care. Engage in activities that bring you joy and help you relax, such as yoga, reading, or spending time in nature. By doing so, you'll become more resilient and better equipped to handle the emotional demands placed upon you. Now that we've identified the patterns of emotional blackmail in our relationships, the next step is crucial: recognizing and challenging negative thought patterns. Think about it like this. Every time you feel trapped or suffocated by your partner's guilt trips, anxiety-inducing comments, or constant criticism, a pattern of thinking emerges. These thoughts often start with, "I'm so lucky to have them," or "What would happen if they left me?" But what happens when these thought patterns become automatic? You begin to feel like you're walking on eggshells, never knowing what trigger will set off a storm. This is where things get really tricky. Our brains are wired to repeat what's familiar, even if it hurts us. We start to believe that we can't survive without this toxic dynamic. But here's the thing, our thoughts are not facts. They're just patterns we've learned from years of being in these situations. By becoming more aware of these thought patterns and challenging them with evidence-based thinking, you'll begin to break free from the grip of emotional blackmail. It's a process that requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to see things as they truly are. So, you've started recognizing the patterns of emotional blackmail in your relationship. The guilt trips, the self-pity, the constant need for validation. You know you can't just sit back and let it consume you. That's where setting clear boundaries comes in. Think of boundaries as a safety net for your emotions. It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, "I'm not okay with being treated this way." Sarah, who was in a similar situation, told me that she started by taking back control of her finances. She set up separate bank accounts, stopped sharing passwords, and even limited her partner's access to their shared online calendar. Setting clear boundaries can make all the difference in a relationship like this. So, it's not about being controlling or distant. It's about being intentional with how you invest your emotional energy. When Sarah did this, she noticed a shift in her partner's behavior. They started respecting her space more, and the guilt trips became less frequent. But establishing healthy boundaries is just the first step. You have to be willing to enforce them, even if it's uncomfortable or difficult. And that's what we're going to explore next: confronting the manipulator, when to stand up for yourself, and how to do it without losing your mind. It's the moment of truth, when you finally realize that your partner has been emotionally blackmailing you for far too long. You're exhausted from constantly walking on eggshells, wondering what will trigger their next tantrum or guilt trip. But as scary as it is to confront the manipulator, staying in this toxic dynamic can be even more suffocating. As I reflect on my own experience with emotional blackmail, I realize that rebuilding trust is a daunting task, but not an impossible one. It's like trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces. You need all parties involved to contribute to the process. For Sarah, it meant having open and honest conversations about boundaries and expectations. She had to create a safe space for her partner to express their emotions without feeling suffocated by guilt or anxiety. Rebuilding trust requires effort from both partners, but it's not just about apologizing or making promises. It's about creating new patterns of behavior and communication that foster respect and empathy. For Emily, this meant setting clear consequences for when boundaries were crossed and following through on them. She had to learn to prioritize her own needs and well-being above the need to please her partner. It's not easy, but with time and effort, trust can be rebuilt. It's a journey that requires patience, understanding, and commitment from all parties involved. As we conclude our story on the devastating effects of emotional blackmail in relationships, I want to leave you with a message of hope. Remember, you are stronger than you think. You've survived the manipulation, the guilt trips, and the constant pressure to conform to someone else's expectations. But it's time to take back control. Recovery from emotional blackmail is possible, but it requires courage, self-love, and support. Think about Sarah, who finally found the strength to leave her emotionally abusive partner after years of suffocating under his toxic demands. She started by setting small boundaries, like taking a walk alone in the morning or having a friend over for dinner without his approval. It was a tiny spark that ignited a fire within her. She began to see herself as worthy of love and respect, not just as someone who could be controlled. Your journey may look different from Sarah's, but it's essential to acknowledge your worth and take the first step towards healing. Whether it's seeking therapy, surrounding yourself with loving friends, or simply taking time for self-care, know that you are not alone in this struggle. There is hope for recovery, and I want you to hold on to that hope tightly. As we say goodbye to Sarah's story, remember that you are not alone. Emotional blackmail may have tried to suffocate her spirit, but she refused to give up, and neither should you. If you're still trapped in a toxic relationship, please know that there is help available. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or professional counselor who can guide you towards healing and freedom. And as always, thank you for watching our channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of hope, resilience, and transformation.